What is up, real world climbers? Thanks so much for joining me in this video. We're back in the shed, garage, workshop. This is going to be new headquarters for real world climbing. We'll call this headquarters number 6 now because this is the 6th different set of home walls that I've personally built and used for myself. If you haven't already checked out the video that I did just a little while ago about this whole project and how it came about, I would recommend that you do that. I'll put a link down in the description for you. That way you can kind of get caught up to speed and see the big picture about what we're trying to accomplish. With all that being said, today is a build day, so we're going to go ahead and start putting up our first walls. The first phase of this is not so much a glamorous phase, but really it's just meant to get some of the kind of peripheral pieces in place before the big major walls are built, because the big major walls are going to take up big expanses. So most of this wall is going to be covered with a gigantic 16-foot wide adjustable board. So when that's in place, I'm not really going to want to try and squeeze things into the corner. So that's why I want to get some of that stuff done first. So that means we're actually going to be building a vert wall here in this section. In the past, I would say that the vert sections are not my favorite because I find that it is hard to set them in a way that is tricky enough. Like, I feel like the footholds especially stick out so much. Even the tiniest footholds, I feel like, stick out so much on an artificial wall that it doesn't really make it hard. But I really do want to still push myself to get better at setting and at those types of climbs, like the slabby slash vert. So I am going to make sure I put some vert section in this build. The other thing and the other reason why I'm having it is because with this gigantic 16-foot wide, 12-foot tall adjustable board that's going to be coming down here, this space is kind of blocked off. Like, there's not much else that could go there other than vert. So that's why I'm doing that. And then the other thing is there's going to be a transition into a probably about 30-degree overhanging wall, a nice big expanse wall. And it's going to be our main fixed wall here on this side wall. And so since that is going to be there, I figured it'd be kind of a cool way to build a transition into this vert section. And to just maybe give you a little bit to catch you up to speed if you're just jumping into this video, is that Jack is really kind of my client in this case. So I did have Jack fill out a questionnaire of like wants and needs and what he's trying to build in his climbing technique, what he wants in a home wall. And since we're sharing this space and we're sharing the climbing walls and all the holds, it's really a dual partnership, but I really wanted his input. So what he really wanted was he wanted something, instead of just having an angle of like 30 degrees and then just having a flat arête, he wanted something that had more of like an obtuse angle, like a wide compression-y kind of angle. And so that's actually what we're going to be doing in this transition from 30 degrees to vert. If that isn't confusing enough, I'll sum it up, is that this vert section that we're going to do is going to be one full section here, straight vert, and then like a diagonal section here because most of the wall will be covering it, this adjustable wall, and then a diagonal section going this way because there's going to be this obtuse angle that's going this way. You're probably just going to have to trust me, but basically that's a section of vert that we're going to put up right now. As with all of my builds, I'm trying to use as much of the materials that we had in our previous walls as possible, like have as little waste as possible. So these boards here that I used on my moon board in headquarters number 5, they're nice, but I'm not really super keen on the paint scheme, so I don't want them to be our main sections of board, as well as the fact that the T-nut system that I'm doing for our adjustable board is slightly different than what I have here. So these are just going to be kind of a unique paint job that's going to go and indicate that that's a vert section. And then the other thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be throwing some additional insulation in behind the wall. Since this is a wall that won't really have access to the back after we put the board up without fully taking panels off, we're just going to plan on insulating behind it in advance. The garage itself already has this closed cell foam insulation, and so I think it's going to be pretty nice already, but just if we ever wanted to put insulation, we might as well do it now. So that's enough talking. Let's go ahead and get started building. All right, so since we're attaching into metal here, I would rather not screw a bunch of the screws right through the plywood into the metal, because you have to use special self-tapping screws that cut through the metal. So instead what we're going to do is we're basically just going to do like a furring strip with 2x4, which happens to fit in here perfectly. And we're just going to do a few into the metal, again using these more expensive and highly specialized self-tapping screws, and then the plywood will get attached to the wood itself. I'm going to start with this first section here in the center that is just going to be flat piece of plywood, no special cuts on the plywood. So this should be the easiest one. What's interesting about these screws is like there's these teeth in here that you need to keep intact so that they have something to bite into the metal with, but you got to get through the wood first. So you kind of got to like almost baby it through the wood until you get your pilot hole built. So I don't think I need to throw like a whole ton of them in here, because the plywood is going to be pulling down, like almost all downward force. So I just need it to be solid enough. So what I'm doing here is even though I'm using offcuts, I do need to make sure at least it goes up the 8 feet that a sheet of plywood is. And I want it to be a little bit more than 8 feet. So like, I'm not sure if you can see this from the camera angle, but the 96 inches comes down a little bit into this base plate of the metal for the actual building itself, but not all the way to the concrete. So the reason why I would like it to be not all the way down to the concrete is because if there is ever any water buildup, I don't want it to soak up into the wood and like rot out the wood or get mold and stuff. So having it a slight little bit off the ground is appealing to me. So this one's pretty good. All right, so that should be good to go for, honestly, the first sheet of plywood. 46. 46. 46 and 2. Isn't that a Tool song? 46 and 2. It is a Tool song. It's a good one too. All right. All right, hopefully you don't get a copyright strike. 46 inches, and there's 2 of them, 46 and 2. There we go. So that was the easy part. Now we got the messy part of we got to put this insulation in here. This is just some cheap stuff I got in gigantic rolls, so it's not paper backed. So hopefully I don't get too itchy when I'm cutting this up. All right, so that's good enough for now. We can slide the last one in top when we put the plywood up. All right, we're ready to put the first piece of plywood up. I've got this piece of particle board here that's just kind of going to be like a shim or just something to keep the ground, keep it off the ground like we talked about earlier. All right, here we go. All right, so it's pretty much centered there. Now I gotta remember I'm not going into the metal, I'm going into the wood. Got our first section of plywood up. So what I'm doing next is I'm just gonna throw this piece of blocking in right up here. So that will give me something to connect the top of this board to and the bottom of the next board to. And actually I think I can just I made it tight enough that I think I can just hammer it in here. I've drawn my line that I'm going to be cutting here, but it hits these intermediate T-nut holes. So I do need to hammer out those T-nuts. So the way I like to do that is, I would usually lay it flat, but I'll give you a visual here. So I just have an extra bolt, and I don't screw it in a lot, but I just give it a couple threads worth to hammer it out. And then it comes out straight and comes right off the T-nut like this. So I'm going to strip all these of that, and then I'm going to rip this piece of plywood in half. Now the other thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking this, and see how this metal here curves a little bit? I'm just going to be taking 3/4 of an inch off in the top corner section of the plywood, so that way it'll fit just right up in there and wedge up in next to the wood. There we go. There we go. A 12-foot climbing wall. All right, so now we're going to work on this section here, keeping in mind that the adjustable wall is going to come out here. So we don't need the whole thing filled up. We're just going to do like a diagonal this way. All right, so then this is going to be the diagonal piece, and so I'm going to cut the top end at a slight angle so it rests right up against there. Boom, look at that. All right, so we got our particle board here to give us the right height off the ground, just like the one before. Okay. It's looking pretty good so far, huh? I almost forgot to put the insulation in though, so I'm gonna stuff that down here now. Oh, fits perfect. Nice. Then we're just going to throw these on top. Here's a little bonus footage for you. I have the one piece of plywood left over, and so I'm going to build this portion that's going to come out onto the ceiling a little bit. Look at that, what a thing of beauty. So that wraps up the vert section, and we're gonna move on to other pieces of the project. I'm really tempted to throw some holds on here and start climbing, but I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up this video with that. Thank you so much for joining me. If you like what we've been putting together, I would love it if you would click the chains on the subscribe button down there, and I'll see you real soon.